Okay, so here are the steps for making a rocket stove, and what you need is an empty paint can, preferably one that's never been used, which you can buy at a place like Sherwin-Williams for about $3. So that's the first thing. I've taken off the lid, and then you need what would typically be a peach can. This is larger than your typical can, and you just cut off one side of that. You leave the other side intact. And then third, a more typical size can, like a can of beans, which you take both the top and the bottom off. These are the three things, and ultimately it's going to be assembled in a way so that this is going to be in there first, and this is going to be coming in from the side. And you'll see how that works as I go along. So the first thing you do is you'll take your smaller can, not the larger one, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting it up against here, and I would say up probably about where those two middle lines would be, are about halfway up the can, maybe a little bit lower. And what we're doing is we're going to be tracing a line around the end of the can up where it meets the paint can. That's going to be the first step. And I'm going to be doing that by laying the paint can on its side, putting this here, using the pen and tracing around the edges of it where it meets the can. So I've now done that trace, and I've made this circle in the can. It's not perfect, it's actually a little oblong, and it's never going to be perfect, but it doesn't have to be. Just make it as good as you can by using the end of the can to trace around. And I would use a nice big permanent marker or something like that that will stay on there and you can see it. Now this is where my method differs from everybody else I've seen on the web so far. I use one of these kind of like a commercial, it's not really a commercial, but it's a nice big firm X-Acto type knife with a really sharp blade on it. Because what I'm going to be doing is, believe it or not, is I'm going to be cutting through this hole and cutting it out. Now you have to start the initial cut by tapping a nail or something somewhere to create an opening for this knife to get into. So I've got the hammer and a screw actually with a sharp one. I'm going to create a little hole right there. Well, I ended up grabbing an actual nail because that screw didn't work. So, I mean, it worked, but it didn't work. So I took a nail, and now look at that hole. It's pretty small, right? But that's what I'm going to use as the starting point for my X-Acto. So see, I've already started the first couple cuts. And don't get me wrong, this is not a pretty thing. Look how it's dented. You know, the can has started to dent in a little bit. It's pretty scary, frankly, to be jamming away and cutting through metal with this because, you know, you got to be careful. Obviously, you could get very badly hurt. Not to mention the sharp parts of the actual inner part of the can are extremely sharp. So, you know, it's not a normal kind of thing. It's not a typical thing you might want to do. That's why some of these people, as I understand it, have done holes all the way around somehow and then popped it out, but I just don't see how that would work. So I do it this way where I cut through all the way around. All right, I've moved to the floor here, a little better footing, but the way you do the cutting is important. It's like jab, 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 jab. And it's not, I mean, a couple times the blade came off this thing, I had to put it back in. It's really not an easy thing to do. I always wear glasses too. I don't see any kind of metal coming loose anywhere, but I sure don't want it going in my eye, so I always wear a pair of glasses when I make one of these. I'm pretty close to going all the way around now, as you can see. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up these last cuts. Now see, this one isn't very pretty. It's the least best circle I've ever done, and even at the end here I'm having a problem where it's going to be hard to disconnect it, so I think I'm just going to twist it and break it off inside. Very jagged, not pretty, but it's fine, it's going to work. Alright, so there it is, not even a perfect circle, the least perfect circle I've done, so in a way that's good. I'll see if it still works fine. There's the part I cut off. That's going to basically be step one, or step two. Drawing the line, cutting it out. So ultimately now the goal is going to be to push this into there, but we don't want to do it yet. There's no reason to. But it looks like it's going to work. I'm going to have to shove it through, but you want it to be a little tight, so that's going to be fine. So now we've got the big peach can and the cut through beans can. A little smaller, and the next step is going to be ironically doing the exact same thing we just did with the paint can and this can. We're going to put this one up to it, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put it up against this can, the peach can, and we're going to draw a circle around it, which we're going to then be cutting out. And on this one, you're going to try to put. Remember, this peach can has the bottom in it still. Okay, so you're going to want to put the hollow one high up toward where the opening is on the peach can. Okay, so you don't want to put it down here toward where the base is that's still there. You want to put it high up where the opening is on the peach can and draw the circle up there. I'd say about that far from the rim maybe. Alright, so there's my circle. As you can see, it's not perfect. It's just really hard to write when you've got a curved surface where there's a gap between the two cans. But I did it, and I'm going to try to go with more or less the larger part of the ring because I don't want it to not be able to fit in. If it's a little loose, that's actually probably okay. So you don't want the circle to be too small when you cut it out. If anything, you want it to be a little bit on the big side. Okay? So now I'm going to start, same thing. I'm going to punch a hole with a nail to get it started. I'm going to take that X-Acto knife and I'm going to cut through this much thicker can. It's probably harder than the paint can. Alright, it's cut through. Now once again, it's not pretty. I mean, look at how much I bent it. This can is very skinny now. You know, it's just a mess, but that doesn't matter. I'm going to kind of bend it back in shape a little bit. Because what we're going to be doing next is you put this newly cut peach can into the paint can. You take this cut through both sides bean can, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pushing this smaller can through the hole and into the hole of the peach can. You get it? So those two, this one and this one, are going to become connected through the paint can. And since I'm not having anybody help me film, I can't show you why I do it, but I'll do it. Now, it's not going to be easy necessarily. Hopefully it's going to be hard to stick this through because you want it to be pretty tight. So I'm going to start pushing, see if I can get it in there and that it will stay intact in one spot. No problem, it popped right in. Okay, now I'm going to line it up with a peach can to connect them. Alright, success. It wasn't easy getting this can to go through into the peach can. I really had to push, but it did work. So now we have the outlines of the rocket stove, okay? Alright, so the next step is going to be to get gravel. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting gravel lined all around here. I'm looking at this, and I probably, if I was going to do it again, and I'm not sure how I did it before, but as I'm looking at how it's come together, I would probably be cutting the hole in the paint can higher up. Now that I look at it, I probably want to have it starting the top of this can and the hole starting about here around instead of down here, because I realize now that I don't have much gap below this peach can where I'd like to have gravel underneath it, and I can't put the gravel nearly as high into the paint can as I would like. I would actually have liked this peach can to come up to about here instead of way down there, because I'm not going to be able to put any more gravel than can go to the top of the peach can for insulation. And there's going to be a little bit more of a gap from any fire coming up out of that peach can to whatever you're trying to cook up here. So it doesn't change anything I've told you, it's just where you're going to be doing your holes. And we'll see how this works. I may test it out after I make it just to see if it does work okay anyway. Okay, so I'm outside now, and there's the gravel. Set the can down and start putting the gravel around the outside of the peach can. You're going to be filling it up. You want to try to get some under the peach can. Like I say, I don't have much room, because what you're creating is you're creating insulation and you're creating hot rocks that will heat up and just magnify big time the amount of heat you're going to produce in your stove. So that's why I wish it was higher, because then I could have a lot of rocks under the peach can here, and I could also have them going up higher toward the lip. But other than that, it's working out really well. Okay, so I've lined it now with rocks all the way flush with the top of the peach can. So now I have a finished rocket stove. Okay? Once again, boy, the thing I would definitely do differently and will do differently in the future is I will have that peach can and that hole up higher so that it's way up here, like I have my other one, where there's not this gap between the top of the rocks and the top of the can, because I think that that's just not good as far as really creating the hottest fire you're going to have with a whole lot of rocks all the way to the top. But I think it will still work, and I will test it. And now I'll be referring you to my videos I made earlier about how to use a rocket stove. And you'll be able to see how when I placed it on this area right here, when there was no snow, I was able to light it. I was able to put a pan on top, and I was able to cook rice. Now, you have to have a gap between the top of the can and wherever you're cooking, because otherwise you're going to snuff it out. So I actually just took kitchen knives and crisscrossed them and made basically a grate, I guess you'd say. But whatever you use that's going to be metal, you're going to have to create a gap so that air can get in, which you'll put your pan on top of that. And you'll see all that in my videos that I'll be sending you links to in a moment. or refer you to or put in this description for this video. But that's how you make a rocket stove.